Welcome to the Lambton, Kent, Middlesex All Candidates debate for the 2021 Canadian federal election. I'm one of your moderators, Karen Chalmers, and I'm the Senior Director of Brand and Engagement at Tech Alliance. And joining me is Lorena Dixon, the Morning Co-Show host for News Talk 1290 CJBK. And I'm going to welcome all of our candidates today and thank them for running in our riding. Your order was drawn in advance, and so we now will have a minute to introduce ourselves. Kevin, please go ahead.
The People's Party of Canada is the only party in the upcoming election that is committed to permanently ending lockdowns here in Canada. We're the only we're the only party that is completely and utterly opposed to vaccine passports. We're the only party that will immediately scrap the carbon tax and exit the Paris Agreement. We're the only party that supports Canadian gun owners. And we're the only party that plans to provide veterans with the benefits and pensions that they were robbed of by Stephen Harper's Conservative government in 2006 and provide them with a lump sum payment. So, one question for the audience: if you are looking to vote for real substantial change in the upcoming election, the People's Party of Canada is your choice. And I challenge everyone to pay attention to the Liberals, the Conservatives, and the NDP, because on all these major issues and all major issues in the campaign, they're all aligned, and the People's Party of Canada is standing by ourselves, offering real good change for the Canadian people.
Thank you. Jason?
Bonjour, Bajiki Nibuit Dijnakaz, Maung and Dodem, Kikonong Ajwadana and Donjaba, Ojibwe, Bodowadami, Odawa, Anishinaabe, and Dao. What I have just shared is my traditional greeting in the Anishinaabemowin language. My name is Jason Henry. I'm currently the elected chief at the Chippewas of Kettle and Stony Point First Nation. I'm the candidate for the NDP for Lambton, Kent, Middlesex. I am a seasoned politician. I'm accustomed to fighting for what is right, fighting for the people in this riding. I love this area, this community. I love Lambton, Kent, Middlesex, particularly because this is where the Indigenous people of my family have originated from. I'm here to fight for what is right for this part of the world and for the members of Lambton, Kent, Middlesex. Chimigwech.
Thank you. And Sadiq.
Hi, I'm Sadiq Ranaday, and I'm the Liberal candidate here for Lambton, Kent, Middlesex. And I think probably the most important thing that people should know is that I'm not a seasoned politician. I've only been really into politics right now for about 3 weeks. And the reason that I'm doing this, though, is because I think that during the pandemic, working as a medical officer of health, I've seen how many decisions that shaped our lives have really been political decisions. And I think it's important to have people who've worked with our communities to help make the decisions that are going to shape our future. So that's really why I'm doing this, and what I hope to achieve with it. And I think the real piece here is about really listening to our communities, listening to the different groups. Yeah.
You go ahead.
Oh, and making their voices heard.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we've had a few candidates not join us today, but I was sent a letter from the Green Party candidate, Jeremy Hull, which I will read now. I first want to apologize to everyone in Lambton, Kent, Middlesex by not being able to attend this all candidates debate. The request reached me last minute, much like this Liberal called election, and I had a prior commitment already. With such a short time to campaign, it is not fair for Canadians to make a decision on rushed speeches and campaign promises. Every constituent in our riding deserves to hear exactly what the local Green Party is standing for, from topics of affordable housing and vaccines to our views on climate change and recovery. Our plan puts people first while rebuilding Canada to be the leader it was meant to be. Together we can change not only local issues, but issues that affect Canada as a nation. This community plays a key role in a green recovery coming out of this pandemic, and its agricultural value surpasses every riding by far. With commitment, transparency, and honesty, we can build a future to be proud of as Canadians. I welcome anybody who would like to contact me directly with questions or concerns to do so. My email is jeremy.hull greenparty.ca. Again, I apologize for my previous commitment, and I look forward to addressing any concerns and questions on the campaign trail. Jeremy Hall. Beyond that, unfortunately, our Conservative candidate, Leanne Rood, sends her regrets as well. So now, gentlemen, we will be moving on to the questions from our constituents. So we will be starting with Kevin. We'll have 1 minute to answer the question, Kevin. And Jason and Sudit, you will have 1 minute to rebut. And I guess I'll start with the question. So critical infrastructure in our communities, such as water, wastewater, and sanitary systems, are experiencing extreme pressures due to life cycle growth and development and climate change. Municipalities need more support now than ever before in a predictable and sustained manner, as these critical infrastructure projects are required to support a basic quality of life for Canadians, and they are very expensive and can span years in an effort to support replacement, renewal, or expansion. How does your party plan to support municipalities across Canada with regard to extreme financial pressures placed on critical infrastructure investments? You have 1 minute.
The People's Party of Canada is committed to making life more affordable for Canadians, and I think that's where it all starts and ends. So on a bigger picture, last year we ran a deficit of $314 billion thanks to our Liberal government. So the People's Party of Canada is the only party, and again, you're going to notice me saying this a lot, but we're the only party that has a real substantial plan to balance a budget within 4 years. Once we're able to balance the budget, we're going to be able to lower taxes, and then we're going to be able to look at spending money and putting Canada and Canadians first. So as far as the plan goes, it's going to be balance of budgets. $6.9 billion was given to foreign countries in last year. By putting Canada and Canadians first, we can allocate so much of those funds into infrastructure projects, into municipalities, to help at a grassroots level and help Canadians improve the affordability and the quality of their life.
Perfect, thank you. Jason, 1 minute.
This in particular is a matter that's near and dear to my heart. It's no secret to Canadians or rural Ontarians that water and wastewater are in a severe need in this country, in particular in rural Ontario. My First Nation is fortunate enough to have clean drinking water, and we've done that by having funding brought to us when it was needed. But that funding right now is not reaching out to where it needs to be. We know that through incidences like Walkerton, the crisis that happened there, that by not having proper training, not having adequate funding, not having personnel on hand to be able to do the work that's necessary, infrastructure fails, breaks down, and people can die. Our party is committed to making sure that funding gets to where it needs to make sure that we keep infrastructure up to today's standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Sudhi?
The Liberal Party also has a strong interest in infrastructure, and we've seen how important it is and also how critical it is as it starts to age, right? One of the things I've heard from our local constituents is that the process can sometimes be, could be faster, and so that would be something I would advocate for, the streamlining of those approvals for the money to come through for infrastructure projects that communities have decided that they need.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so the second question is surrounding affordable housing. It's a very important issue in this election. I'm sure you'd all agree. We'll start with you, Kevin. How exactly will your party work to alleviate Canada's affordable housing crisis?
Am I this time, or does it go here?
Jason.
Jason's
Oh,
next.
sorry, Jason. Oh, there you go. Do you want me to repeat the question?
No, that's fine.
No? Okay.
So it's no secret that the NDP, the very top of our commitments, is accessible housing, and that's a huge problem right now. And I can't even begin to fathom how hard it's going to be for my children to actually purchase their first home. The rates are so high, and one of the main targets that we have with the NDP is extending the mortgages to 30 years, investing heavily in CMHC, also removing. Adding on a buyer's tax to those that are buying and speculating outside of the country. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, and now Sadiq.
The Liberal Party has a pretty comprehensive platform on affordable housing. Part of it is about increasing the supply to build 1.4 million new houses, and the other part is cracking down on things like speculation and foreign property investment. And so with those two things combined, along with some financial incentives like a tax-free home savings account, that should do quite a lot to improve the affordable housing situation over the next few years. It's something we're seeing here too in this area.
Okay, and now Kevin.
To me and the PPC, the biggest issue with affordable housing is the actual price and cost to build a house. Inflation's been at 3.7%. Typically in Canada, we target it at 1%. So with rising inflation, I know inflation's tough for some people to wrap their heads around, but rising inflation means rising costs. Groceries are more, lumber is more. To build a house in 2017 cost $186,000, an average house. Now, in 2021, that's up a whopping 25% to $248,000. So we're adding $60,000 on the cost of just the raw cost to build a house. How are Canadians ever going to afford that when things become so much less affordable? And I think coming back to the PPC and how we're different than the NDP and the Liberals and the Conservatives, they're all about continuing spending. Up in, like, I think the closest one was the Conservatives at 10 years, but by balancing the budgets, by stopping to print money, by stopping inflation, bringing down the price of commodities, making houses more affordable to build, will also eventually make them more affordable to buy.
Okay, perfect timing.
Okay, so the next question will go to Sadiq. Does your party plan to prioritize public resources, including mental health services, over policing and private institutions?
It's a great question. I think, so in the platform that we just announced, we're suggesting spending $4.5 billion on a specific mental health transfer, like the healthcare transfer, that would provide for specific mental health funding across the provinces. And that's probably one of the most effective ways that the federal government can get involved in mental health.
We're going backwards. Okay.
Oh gosh, sorry, Kevin. My apologies.
No problem. So I don't think this is a fair question on any level for anybody. I don't think we should be talking about splitting up funding for police and fire, which is so essential, versus mental health, which is just as important in a completely different realm. Again, when it comes to public spending, the first thing we have to do is allocate the funds that we do have in the most important areas. Because of the Liberal lockdowns, mental health has never been worse. I was reading a stat that even children on antidepressants is up 700%. Every stat along the line shows how detrimental and dangerous and destructive the lockdown measures have been on our country. And I think, and I know the People's Party of Canada is invested in putting Canadians in Canada first, and we'll make sure to allocate all the funds as best as possible as we strive towards balancing the budget.
Thank you. Now it's your turn.
So what we know is that health transformation has been promised for decades, and it has never filtered through. And what we also know is that we have an opioid crisis and addictions crisis across Canada, a crisis that does not discriminate on race, color, creed, or social status. The only thing that it does is it tears families apart, and it's not based on anything except for trauma. Trauma that can be treated by proper mental health treatment and investments. I know that that's one of my priorities. I've spoken heavily about it throughout my entire time as a leader in my community, that we have to make change. Speaking with Jagmeet Singh about a month ago, he too has addictions near and dear to his heart. It's at the very top of our thinking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and we're going to start again with Kevin on this question. Our region, like many across Canada, has been impacted by deaths caused by opioid addictions. What knowledge do you have of this topic, and what will your party do to address it?
I think, like a lot of Canadians, I have opioid addiction has hit close to home. I had a best friend that struggled with it for decades. And I think the biggest thing that this comes back to is having a government that has the strength to take on the pharmaceutical industry. As we see now with mandated vaccines, with all the garbage that's gone on with COVID, all the misinformation, big tech censoring information, we have to get back to fundamentals and not have a government that's so closely tied to big farm. That's not tied to lobbyists. Maxime Bernier is the best political leader this country's seen in at least 50 years. He has no affiliations. And I think by first off addressing the issue and not looking to more drugs, methadone, more things to address it, and even like Mr. Henry said here, focusing on root causes, mental health, getting people the help that they need to address the issue is a primary concern of the People's Party of Canada.
Okay. And now you, Jason?
Well, first of all, the one struggle that I think we've all seen through COVID-19 is that people reached an end to the thread that was holding us on mentally. And what else that pushed people to the edge was seeing the division in the country, divided on vaccinating or anti-vaccinating, on gun laws or no gun laws, on borders opened or closed. That divisive type of a Canadian culture that we're being pushed to for some reason to maybe mirror the United States is making people feel despair. What we have to do to help with the opioid crisis is be able to work together to create an inclusive, open, barrier-free country that people do not feel hate, anguish, and despair. Thank you.
Anne-Sophie?
Yeah, I think that the opioid crisis has two dimensions to it, and you really need to address both at the same time, right? So for the immediate urgent care and treatment of people with addiction, you need wraparound supports and services that extend beyond a clinic into the places where they live. But you also need to go back to the root causes of opioid and other substance use. And a lot of that is in early childhood development, and those programs take time and they need investment. And so you really need a two-part strategy, a short-term and a long-term one to deal with opioids. And that's something for everybody to be considering, I think, right now and investing in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next question. Jason, tell us how your party will respond to the needs of rural and small town Canada and provide at least one example.
Okay, well, I mean, that's our riding. We are rural and small town Canada, and I really feel like we've been overlooked. So we have a lot in that area in terms of broadband, putting caps on cellular data, investing in infrastructure. We also are looking at small businesses, and small businesses are the heart of small town rural Canada. Small businesses is not exclusive of farmers. So helping out with healthcare, Pharmacare, $10 cap on childcare to make sure that people are able to get to work, and investments in EI. So training and retraining, proactive training, so that as the environment around us changes and the employment situations change around us in bigger cities and urban cities that we have to move into, that our people can have proactive investments into their training so they can keep employed. Thank you.
Can I ask you to repeat the question?
Sure. Please tell us how your party will respond to the needs of rural and small town Canada and provide a specific example.
Okay, thanks. I really think the first piece is listening, right? Rural communities do have some of similar needs, but not every need is the same in every community. So I think the first part is really listening, having a mechanism to understand what rural communities need by community, and then working on some of the common ones like internet access, like infrastructure, like reduced demographic sort of shift, people moving out of those small communities, right? So you can work on those things, but you need to first listen to each community and understand what's going on. And then you can make some local tailored solutions as well as some national solutions. And I think we've seen efforts for national solutions with respect to broadband internet, with respect to rural service delivery. A lot of people say they can't get doctors, and that's part of our plan as well. So services and infrastructure and internet.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The PPC is committed, again, to making life more affordable for Canadians, and I think that's the biggest thing for rural Canadians is living an affordable life. Couple other things, firearms. The PPC is the only party committed to repealing all the ridiculous legislation that's been passed by the Trudeau government. Pipelines, PPC is the only, and you think so, I say the only, and I want all the conservatives that aren't happy with Aaron O'Toole and understand that he's just a liberal in blue. I want you to understand all these times that I'm saying the only, because as much as I respect the NDP and the Liberals, the Conservatives have joined them over on the left on spending, where the PPC is on our side. We want to get the pipelines up and running. We want to make sure that we have, maximize our oil supply to be able to make life more affordable. And lastly, for rural Canada, that's where most of our veterans have live, and we're committed to not only restoring the benefits and pensions, but also paying them a lump sum payment all the way back to 2006 because of all the sacrifices that they've made for our country.
Thank you.
Okay, that's your time. This is a two-part question, and we'll start with Sadit. Identify and explain one specific way your party will support small business, and do you have experience running a small business?
Okay, so I think that there are incentives in the platform to ensure innovation in small business. I think in terms of my own experiences, running a campaign is a little bit like running a small business, but actually, in fact, most of my experience comes in the public sector, and I think part of that, we're looking to do some of the same things, to innovate, to be efficient, and I know that small businesses have particular needs, and I think it's important to listen very carefully to them because they have been changing. I've spoken to a lot of people in the hospitality sector who've been really impacted by COVID, right? And so all small businesses are not the same. Small businesses in different industries need different solutions with respect to what's happening in their sector. And I think that's something that we can work towards.
Okay, and we'll go to Jason now. Oh, okay. Yes, Kevin.
So I am a small business owner. I have 16 employees, and I felt the crunch of COVID and lockdown restrictions. So the one way that the People's Party of Canada is going to service small business owners that neither the Liberals nor the Conservatives nor the NDP, who are all committed to keep on putting lockdown measures in place, is by opening up our society and allowing small business owners to support for their families. Another way that we're going to support small businesses, again, to make it more affordable, to lower corporate and personal income taxes, to take away capital gains tax. The People's Party of Canada is really a party for small business owners and for any Canadians looking for real substantial change.
Jason?
Oh, Jason, sorry, yes.
Okay. So, yes, like my colleague here, I have a few small businesses my family operates, and again, felt the crunch definitely in COVID-19. And generally speaking, as a small business owner with so much investments and so much support for big box stores, big business, and the favoritism from the current situation we're in right now for those big money companies. I had time in Grand Bend recently to sit down with some small Main Street business owners, and they are feeling so hurt by the advantage taken of our government by those people away from our area, utilizing CERB to buy businesses on main streets, take over and take money away from our small businesses. What we plan to do is go after the ultra rich, go after those that have the privilege right now, and make sure that money gets to where it needs to go. Part of that is by investing in EI, also small business supports, childcare, Pharmacare, of course, will help small business owners as well. Thank you very much.
Okay. Moving on to some COVID questions, or a COVID question. Would each of the candidates state if they're fully vaccinated for COVID and explain the benefits of becoming fully vaccinated? Kevin, begin.
Is it me?
Yep.
Sorry, just can you ask the question again? I thought it was.
Oh, no, that's okay. Would each of the candidates state if they're fully vaccinated for COVID? Also explain the benefits of becoming fully vaccinated.
I think anybody's choice on what they do to their own body is personal and should be none of anybody else's business. The PPC fully supports our individual rights and freedoms. I am not vaccinated, and I support anybody that's not. But at the same time, if anybody doesn't feel comfortable saying that, then that's their own choice. The attacks on our individual rights and freedoms by Justin Trudeau and his government, and supported by the NDPs and supported by the Conservatives, is a direct attack on our fundamental democracy, our fundamental, basically the fundamental structure of our society. And there's absolutely no scientific evidence that supports the benefits of being fully vaccinated. I just saw today that 2 Chatham-Kent doctors in the ER both tested positive for COVID with being fully vaccinated. Over in Israel, the most vaccinated country in the world, They have the highest rate of infection for COVID right now. The numbers aren't adding up. The vaccines aren't working, and our government and the pharmaceutical industry has continued to hammer home a
that's
false
all.
narrative that is not okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Sudip? No. Gosh, now we're going to Jason. I'm so sorry. It's my fault.
Confusing.
It is.
So I am double vaccinated. I was vaccinated sort of in the second round. Thank you to Dr. Renedade for helping with that in my community, but I was in the second round of vaccinations in my community. I'm a first responder. I get out, I'm a volunteer firefighter, and I have to be out there as a community leader interacting with people. I have a very low risk threshold because I have so many people that I'm engaged with. We're out there providing naloxone and Narcan to people that are on the streets overdosing, seniors and people with healthcare needs out there doing first responder stuff. So for those that have a threshold that permits them to stay home and stay away from everybody else and not have to vaccinate, that's fine, stay home and do that. But if you have to be out working with vulnerable people where you could make somebody else sick that maybe doesn't have such a strong immune system as you, I feel that it's the right thing to do your part and be vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you. Sudip?
Sure. So I am fully vaccinated or double vaccinated, whatever you'd like to say. But I do think it's important that we respect the right of people not to have to divulge their personal health information. So just like nobody has to tell you if they have COVID or had COVID, they don't have to tell you if they've been vaccinated. That is not what we should be requiring of each other in terms of personal discussions, right? What the biggest benefit of COVID vaccination is to, primarily the person who is vaccinated has a much, much, much lower chance of being hospitalized or dying, which are the two things that we should really care about the most. And then on top of that, they have a lower chance of getting infected in the first place, which means that they have a less likelihood of passing that infection on to others.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we're starting with Jason this time. Jason, will your party support the establishment of a national child care program? I think I already know the answer to that.
Yes, of course we will. So, on that fact itself, my wife right now is not able to be at work because we can't find childcare, and we live in Kettle and Stony Point. So in order to get childcare for the foster kids that we have to take the kids to Sarnia, 45 minutes away, just so that she can re-enter the workforce. 10 times as many women today, based on prior to the pandemic, are out of the workforce. And that's an unfair fact. It speaks to many issues beyond childcare. It speaks to gender equality and everything else. So, of course, this is one of our main things as well as childcare, $10 childcare and more accessible childcare. Thank you very much.
Okay. And Sudip, your turn.
Yes, absolutely. The Liberal Party has a promise for affordable early childcare, and that's moving towards a system where nobody has to pay more than $10 a day. And the benefits of that for children are actually quite great, as well as families, in order for them to participate in work and other activities that they do outside of childcare. So yes, most definitely.
And Kevin, your turn.
Well, in a perfect world, we could go ahead and give millions of dollars across the board to everybody, or adopt an NDP platform. But in reality, we're in a crunch. $314 billion we were in debt last year alone. We were in a deficit of. So affordable childcare, it all starts with affordable life for Canadians. The PPC is the only one that plans to balance the budget within 4 years, and thus stopping inflation, bringing the price of groceries down, bringing the price of labor down, everything, making life more affordable. And ultimately in this election, there's so many more pressing and huge issues than finding out a way to spend more money that we don't have, that would have to burden our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and now if it goes down this path, maybe even our great-grandchildren trying to pay off the money that we're spending today.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next question. Will your party actually prioritize addressing and ending the water boil advisories in First Nations communities locally and across the country? What will be the timeline for addressing this issue? Sudip?
Sure. So the party has made very strong commitments to ending the boil water advisories in all First Nations communities across Canada. It's unfortunate long-standing issue, and it needs to be resolved quickly. And I think that we have the technology and the funding and the ability to work with First Nations communities to do that, and that's the plan.
Thank you. Kevin.
Currently, Indian reserves and the Indigenous population gets $21 billion of funding from the federal government. And the People's Party of Canada has an excellent plan to work with the Indigenous reserves to make sure that the money that has been given to them is spent in the most efficient and effective way possible. There's never been any sort of accountability when it comes to spending of the $21 billion. And we feel that by working closely with leaders and holding council and tribe accountable for the money they spend, that we'll be able to formulate a plan and work together to get everyone clean drinking water, because it's inexcusable in 2021 to not have clean drinking water across the country.
Thank you. Jason.
Well, it's 2021, and there's communities in Canada that don't have clean drinking water. Despite promises and more money spent by the Liberals fighting Indigenous communities than on solving the clean drinking water issue. First Nations have extreme accountability, and we're going to spend more money on September 30th giving federal employees a paid holiday than we're going to give to creating clean drinking water this year. We could probably build at least one water plant with the same amount of money we're going to spend on giving people a holiday on the backs of Indigenous people. I also know that more money is spent on healthcare benefits, sick time, and paid leave for First Nation Indigenous Services federal employees than makes it to my band office. Thank you very much.
Okay. Tied into this question is this one. Since the Truth, and we're with Kevin, right? Yes. Since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission completed its report in 2015, only 14 of the 94 recommended calls to action have been fulfilled. Will your party ensure that the remaining 80 calls to action are implemented as was promised by the present government?
I think the present government, the Trudeau Liberals, have done pretty much everything wrong across the board. So the PPC is completely invested and committed to evaluating every single thing they did, from the gun laws to what we were speaking about here, to lockdown policies, to the excessive spending of $314 billion in debt. So to answer the question simply, no, absolutely not. The People's Party of Canada will be evaluating and taking a look at obviously a better way to achieve the same goal. But it's really important to note that the Justin Trudeau Liberals have failed Canada greatly. The Aaron O'Toole Conservatives are committed to going down the exact same path, not evaluating anything, not making any changes, continuing down the exact path that we're on. So I challenge anybody watching today, if you want real substantial change, keep on listening, keep on following Aaron O'Toole, NDP, Liberals. They're all planning the same exact thing, and the path that we're on is not a one for success.
Okay, and Sadit, same question?
Yeah, I think that the Liberal Party is committed to moving forward on the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I think when you start governing, there's always a question of how much you can do at once, and so you have to start prioritizing among the different ones and moving pieces forward as you can. And I think that many of the parties are committed to moving forward as quickly as they can, and so are the Liberals as well. I think it's a key piece of the strategy.
Okay, and Jason.
So the answer is yes, but beyond that, I mean, the NDP, I've given up my time, my energy, my income, and my family to be here to fight for the NDP. Jagmeet Singh, as far as I can tell, and as far as I know from personal face-to-face interactions and conversations, is the only leader and the only party that actually has First Nations at heart. Not as a platform, not as a checkbox, but at heart. I mean, Jody Wilson-Raybould is a good example of how we've seen historically Indigenous people and women treated in this country. A woman that stood up for what was right, and look what happened. And when she spoke up, very passively spoke up on June 30th about the 215 children, the Minister of Indigenous Services texted her one simple phrase, pension ? That's how Indigenous people have been treated. She was the Attorney General. That's how she was treated. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to start with you, Jason. How will your party fight racism in all forms in Canada?
Wow. So, I mean, the leader, Jagmeet Singh, is a visual Sikh. And that's what this party is all about. It's about inclusion. It's about diversity. It's not just about racism. It's about being inclusive across the board. And I think it's done by action and by leadership. When I drive across Lambton, Kent, Middlesex, because it's a huge riding, I drive past this sign that says, "Turn this way for Uncle Tom's Cabin." So I know that deep inside of the DNA of people in Lambton, Kent, Middlesex, we have that in us too. We know what is right and we can make that change. And I believe that I'm the person to help with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry, Susie.
I think that there are two pieces to this puzzle as well, probably more, but the fundamental piece around racism, one of them is how we interact with each other and the cultures that drive us towards that. And the other part is the systems and how systems treat people. And I think that's a place where the federal government has a significant responsibility, is to look at how systems treat people. And if that treatment, if the way that the systems are set up fundamentally discriminates, then that needs to be looked at and addressed. And I think that there are ideas in the platforms to deal with it, but I think we have to acknowledge that racism is such a big issue that it's not one that can be tackled easily with one policy platform or one policy pillar, right? This is a thing that we have to move forward on consistently in all parts of society.
Kevin.
For myself personally and for the People's Party of Canada, when you talk about racism in Canada, it's really important to start digging deeper into the bigger issue. Justin Trudeau's Liberals committed $300 million to the critical race theory. And the critical race theory, in a nutshell, says that all white people are racist fundamentally, and that we have to look in a mirror every single day to recognize our own racism. I think that's a load of crap. I think that the moment you start calling any, whether it be white, Indigenous, Sikh, wherever, the moment you start shining a spotlight on it, and Jason talked about it, was the fact that once creating division. Well, that's what we're doing. That's what the left-wing media has been doing. And we got to get back to really focusing on fundamentals of loving each other, of being good people, of treating each other right and treating each other fair, rather than focusing on women, to men, to different races, to the gender issues. All this stuff is social constructions, and we got to tear it back and really focus on being good people, being good Canadians, and treating each other well.
Thank you.
This was that two-part question, I think, that you had too.
Oh,
Yeah. Is that okay?
sure.
Yep. Okay.
Yes, you're right. 22, correct?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm going to start with Sadiq. Will your party continue to support the banning of, I'll start that again. Will your party support the banning of conversion therapy of any kind and support the 2S LGBTQIA plus community locally and across the country?
Sure. So the answer to that question and the other question is yes and yes. I think
I'm sorry, did I jump ahead on something?
No.
Okay,
No, you're good.
please go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
there
go
were two
ahead.
questions there.
Yes.
There
Yes,
were.
Okay,
yes,
yes.
and yes.
I'm sorry.
So the Liberal Party was originally introduced the ban on conversion therapy, and as an aside, as a scientist, I mean, again, when you're looking at these things, you have to look at the evidence, and there's no evidence that is a reasonable or effective intervention at all, right? So banning it makes a lot of sense to prevent the harms that it causes, and so that's part of the support. But then on the other side, advancing a greater focus on diversity and inclusion in all parts of society is going to help us move forward with LGBTQ2IA plus community members.
Thank you.
Can you repeat the question for me, please?
Yes, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Will your party support the banning of conversion therapy of any kind, and support the LGBTQIA+ Two-Spirit community locally and across the country.
The PPC is 100% committed to keeping the ban on conversion therapy. As far as when it comes to the movement, there's too many letters there for me to remember. I think the PPC is committed to really focusing on reality and sticking within that. When it comes to sexes, there's a man and a woman. The PPC, Maxime Bernier, has been very straightforward on that. All science is straightforward on that. Every single mammal in the history of the Earth has had males and females, and we're committed to that. My campaign manager is openly gay. He came out in 1999, and he is against a lot of the things that this movement stands for. So I think as far as that movement goes, they have to find their path back to reality, and the PPC is committed to helping that happen.
So yes, absolutely. And I definitely am an ally, and I'm here to fight for the two-spirited people. And I'll use that phrase because that's what's culturally appropriate in my culture is two-spirit. And that's the 2S in the acronym that you used earlier on. So we supported the ban on conversion therapy, and it was actually one of the factors that pushed me over, along with the Every Child Matters movement and the children, when our current Member of Parliament voted against the criminalization of that hurt me. In 2021, when we're supposed to be an inclusive, open, loving country, we support conversion therapy. That hurt me. And I know that the NDP and myself support Every Child Matters. And what Every Child Matters stands for is every child matters. No, it doesn't matter race, gender, or color. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're back to starting with Kevin. Will your party aggressively support the establishment of a national Pharmacare program?
I think with this again, there's a lot of these questions. As much as I appreciate them, there's some really big issues in the upcoming election. Freedom being the number one, and I think for us, for the PPC, it's all about three things. It's about freedom, affordability, and putting Canada and Canadians first. And once we tackle all the big issues, we can start looking and evaluating where we're going to spend money. But right away, what we want to do is make sure that we balance the budget in the best, most efficient way possible. And then once the budget's balanced, then we can look at ways that we can support Canadians better. And like I mentioned before, even right away, taking away big business bailouts, $5.9 billion just got given to Air Canada. Imagine what that money could do given to Canadians and put into proper use in our riding and other ridings around Canada.
Okay, thank you. And Sadiq, your turn.
So yes, there's some really good evidence that a national Pharmacare program is actually a cost-saving measure because you can negotiate better prices for those medications, and then people who need them will not be able to, will be able to either afford them or have them without excessive cost. And so this Liberal government is definitely committed to pushing forward on a Pharmacare program. The challenge is always the implementation. You have to work with provinces. You have to ensure that there's a lot of details are sorted out well before you can move that program forward. But in principle, I think there's a strong commitment to it.
Okay. And Jason.
So this is not new to the NDP platform. The NDP has advocated for Pharmacare for a long time. And people may have thought that was a bad idea previously, but after what we've experienced over the last 18 months of a pandemic, we recognize as Canadians that Pharmacare is extremely important. And not only does it give us bargaining power to buy in bulk, but also by having affordable Pharmacare, we can reduce rates at the hospital. We can reduce the rates of people having that grow to more critical illnesses, where parents can choose, or don't have to choose over medicine or food, or over a roof over their head, or over appropriate clothing for their kids. Pharmacare will help everyone. It's money saved. Thank you.
Okay, have that next question, please.
You want you to?
Yeah, or sure, I'll ask.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
So Jason, what is your party's stance on increasing old age security payments for seniors? In particular, those 74 and under were left out of the recent increase.
Yes, that's part of our commitment. And I've lost my grandparents in the past couple of years, but I mean, it was very difficult for them to survive on the amount of income that they had. So we do have on our platform an increase in funding for our seniors. Again, to touch on the Pharmacare and healthcare as well as dental care, all of those are key factors that help our senior population be able to survive. In Indigenous culture, our children and our elders are two of the anchor points that we revolve around. So we are absolutely 100% in support of increasing old age care for our seniors. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
So yes, it's part of the party platform, the Liberal Party platform, to increase the both the old age care benefit as well as the guaranteed income supplement for people over 65. So yes, that's included in the current platform.
Thank you.
Repeat the question, please.
Okay. What is the party's stance on increasing old age security payments for seniors, in particular those 74 and under, left out of a recent increase?
The People's Party of Canada is committed to putting Canada and Canadians first. Well, one of the primary things I've talked about a few times is affordability. The more affordable we can make life, the less that seniors and people that demographic need to spend. Anybody that's gone to a grocery store in the last year can see how much the grocery bill is raised for one thing, the price of for rent, the price to heat, and provide utilities for your house. All these things are primary focus of the People's Party of Canada. And I touched a little bit on the veterans, but providing the proper funding to veterans, a lot of people in that demographic served our country, and ultimately we'll evaluate the best ways to make life more affordable, because the seniors of our country are ones that we have to make sure we take care of, because they lay the groundwork for the society we now enjoy.
Thank you.
Okay, very timely question, and we'll start with you, Sadiq. What should Canada do to support Afghans and Afghan refugees? So the people still in the country and those who've come over.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have to do the best that we can there, especially for the folks that have been helping, right, to shape that country and to work with Canadian and other forces to help stabilize the country over so many years. I think, I think that's part of our obligation. I know that there's a mechanism for folks either here or in the country to call consular services to help get additional help to get out so that we can bring them here. And we've also launched a significant resettlement plan that includes up to 20,000 Afghani citizens, similar to plans that we've done in other places. And so I think that it's critical. It's really a part of our global responsibility, and we need to move forward and fulfill it.
Okay, Kevin, same question.
It was great that the Liberal candidate had the answer for it first, because why in the world did we pull out so quickly, and why was there not a better plan in place in preparation for pulling out of Afghanistan? Why were thousands of Canadians left there? It blows my mind. As outside of running in this election, it blows my mind that Justin Trudeau, instead of working with his cabinet to make a really good, solid plan to exit the country for Canadians, he instead decided to call an election. And I just read an article recently talking about Canadians specifically that were over in Afghanistan right now that have been calling the consulate, have been calling the government, and Trudeau and his cabinet ministers and all the candidates running are too busy trying to spend $256 million in another election, trying to get more seats, to try to get more power, instead of focusing on what really matters. And it's just yet another example how the Trudeau Liberals have ultimately failed Canadians in this country, and how the NDP and the Conservatives are not much better choice.
Jason?
Well, we must do what Canadians do, and we've always been there when people need help. That's what we do best. We are peacekeepers, we're helpers. We're fortunate enough to live in the greatest country in the world, and we need to extend some of that great kindness that we do have inside of ourselves to the people of Afghan. What we can't do is sit idly by like we did when Mr. Trump stripped families apart at the border in the United States. We have to make sure that we are helping. We cannot be absent when people need our help. Thank you.
Okay. Kevin, all parties have called for a price on carbon. If your party forms government, will you implement a plan to meet our Paris Accord commitment, and more importantly, to reach net zero by 2050?
Finally, a very good and applicable question that Canadians really want to know the answer to. And the People's Party of Canada is the only party, like I mentioned, that's committed to immediately ending the carbon tax, immediately getting into the Paris Accord agreement, immediately ending all relationships with the United Nations, who does not care about the success and the prosperity of our country. And some quick numbers for the audience. Canada right now produces 1.5% of all world emissions. China produces 28% instead of 1.5%. Meanwhile, life's so unaffordable, the Liberal government and the Conservatives and the NDPs are all committed to continuing to financially burden Canadians to reduce our 1.5%, instead of the People's Party of Canada focusing on putting more pressure on China to reduce their 28%, and then coming up with real good strategies on how to improve the air, the land, and the water quality in our country in a very cost-effective and practical way.
Thank you. Sudhi. Oh gosh, no, Jason. Oh,
Repeat the question first.
yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
All parties have called for a price on carbon. If your party forms government, will you implement a plan to meet our Paris Accord commitment, and more importantly, to reach net zero by 2050?
Yes, we certainly will. And I appreciate that the economy is extremely important and dollars and cents are very important. But if we do not protect our environment, then money does nothing. You can't eat money. You can't eat the economy. We have to have a world to live in. The indigenous way of perspective of thinking is water is life. In regards to carbon tax, we plan to keep the carbon tax, but focus that and direct it to big polluters. We're not going to pass it down through the big polluters, through the producers, to your pockets. We're going to make sure that those who are actually polluting pay. And currently, Canada is the only country that has not made strides in moving towards the Paris Accord. If elected and forming government, NDP will move to reducing carbon. Thank you.
Now it's your turn.
So look, I think the critical challenge here is to move fast enough to make a difference on climate change, but slowly enough to keep enough people with us along the way, right? And so yes, we're committed, and yes, we're going to move ahead with this, but I think I've also heard from our local constituents that there are some differential ways in which that plays out in our local agricultural communities that may need to be looked at, differential ways in which the rules are either applied or not applied, and we need to be consistent with that and responsive to what's going on in our local communities. So I think that's a part of it. So local implementation needs to be clear and consistent, but also, we have to move fast enough to make a difference, but slowly enough to bring everyone along with us so that we don't leave people out in the transition to a sustainable economy.
Okay. Just noticing this next question is very similar to what you all just answered, so we'll skip this one. And I believe we're with Jason first now. And in the event, Jason, of another minority government, explain how your party will work with other parties to establish good governance for Canada.
Well, that's great. And so I've heard this sort of rhetoric out there that Jagmeet Singh supported, propped up, or was sort of like the go-to guy for Justin Trudeau. But what actually happened in the last minority government, and what could very well happen again, is that the NDP will work together, as Canadians should, to make sure that we have good governance, not to draw these deep party lines and politicize things like gun control. We'll work together to make sure that we are all working for the people of Canada, not working for big corporations, not working for political credibility or political clout, working for people. That is what the NDP do. They work in the middle and collaborate. Thank you very much.
And Sadiq, same question?
I think fundamental to good governance is good conversation. You have to be able to have a conversation with people who might think differently about that idea so that you can move forward with some clarity and understand the issues better. And so even, regardless of what happens in the election, if there's a minority government, it forces people to work together in more consistently. You have to be at that table more often and collaborating more often, and we would do that as well. We would do that, whatever is needed to make sure that the conversations are had to get the policies that we need to move forward as Canadians.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. In the event of another minority government, explain how your party will work with other parties to establish good governance for Canada.
It's a great question again. I think for the People's Party of Canada, because we're so different than the other three parties, because the Conservatives, Liberals, and NDP are basically one party now, a vote for the PPC, the People's Party of Canada, every seat that we get, every candidate that we have in the House of Commons provides a different voice, a voice for freedom, a voice for personal responsibility, a voice for affordability. As much as we all want everything right at once, it's really important to have a good a differentiating view, and the People's Party of Canada would be committed to bringing the voice of reason, bringing the voice of fiscal responsibility, bringing the voice of freedom, and making sure that we end these really dangerous lockdowns that have caused so much mental health issues that we've touched on before, small business closures, economic despair, domestic violence, all these things. The People's Party of Canada will fight for Canadians to ensure that better decisions are made moving forward in regards to the previous things I've mentioned.
Yes.
I've just been given a statement from Leanne Rood's office, just like we did with our Green Party. I'd like to read the statement from our Conservative Party as well. So, since 2019, it has been my honor and privilege to serve you as the Member of Parliament for Lambton, Kent, Middlesex. During this time, I've been hearing from people all across our riding. The past 18 months have been very hard on them and their families. It has been hard on people's mental health and sense of well-being. It has been hard on businesses shut by lockdowns. Like you, I want to see our economy open up so jobs can be created and people can get back to work and support their families. Like you, I'm very concerned about the erosion of our freedoms over the past 18 months. Conservatives get it. We have a plan. Our leader released it on day one, and unlike the status quo parties, our plan respects your fundamental rights. We will rebuild our economy and secure the future without violating your freedom of speech or your medical autonomy. Ladies and gentlemen, you have a choice. This election is about deciding which party and party leader will uphold your rights and freedoms to live your life, earn a living, raise your family, and care for your loved ones. Do you really want Justin Trudeau telling you how to live your life? Do you really want the Liberals in Ottawa to make vaccination mandatory for you, your children, and your older loved ones? On day 2 of this campaign, our leaders said that Conservatives will not make vaccines mandatory, period. We Conservatives made our platform public, all of it, at the beginning of the campaign. We have a plan for getting Canadians back to work and for kickstarting businesses to run at full throttle, creating jobs. We have a plan for putting the brakes on deficit spending so that your children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren are not left to pay off over $1 trillion in Liberal debt. We have a plan for making groceries and household essentials affordable and not out of sight. Conservatives believe that home ownership should not just be a dream. Owning a home should be a realistic financial goal for all Canadians' families. For those of you who are now living on a fixed income in retirement, we Conservatives want to make sure you have more after-tax dollars to spend and that those dollars go farther for you and your loved ones. You have a choice. You can vote for more of the same with the Liberals, as we've seen in the last 6 years, or you can vote for the Conservative Party and a change. We say no to mandatory vaccines, no to unsustainable deficits and debt, and yes to our freedoms, including the freedom to earn a living and make a life with our loved ones and families. That is why I ask for your support and your vote. My name is Leanne Rood, Conservative Party candidate for Lambton, Kent, Middlesex. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, now closing remarks for all of those who are here. And Sudit, we will ask for your closing remarks, 2 minutes, first of all.
Okay. So here goes. I think this is probably one of the strangest job interviews I've ever had, because we're asking 100,000 people to basically give you this job, right? And I think it ultimately comes down to this. 100,000 people in a very large riding are never going to agree on everything. And so the fundamental thing here is that you need to be able to come to the person who you've elected with a problem. And you have to be able to come with an issue or something that's happening in your community and know that that person is going to be interested, invested, and that they're going to take it seriously. And where they can take that concern to the federal government for help or refer you for help, that they'll do that. And that's what I've been doing through the entire pandemic, and that's what I would continue to do for our community. And that promise is a promise no matter what political ideology or background somebody who lives in the community would come from, right? I think the first piece is that you have to have a person here who's going to represent the riding and the constituents well, and I promise to do that first. The second piece is then talking through the policies and how they're implemented here and having some say, bringing our voice to the places where the decisions are made so that our voices, our local voices, are heard in decision making. And that's the second promise that I'm making to you. So it's really to listen and to listen to you and then to represent you. And I think that in order to do that, you need somebody that you can talk to. And I think that that's me. So that's why I'm doing this, and that's why I would be asking for your support.
Okay, thank you. And Kevin. Oh, all right, we'll go to Jason.
Okay. So thank you. And I think if we wanted to hear more of the sort of party hard lines, we could tune into CBC and hear the leaders speak, right? But here we are in Lambton, Kent, Middlesex, and we just heard a read out statement from the incumbent Leanne Rood to not vote the same way. Interesting statement from the incumbent that if you want change, don't vote the same way. So I'm all for that statement, actually. Let's vote differently. Let's vote for change. And realistically, Dr. Renardate is right. I mean, we need leaders here that are here to work, that are here to listen, and need to be able to understand what is needed. Not focus on making sure that big business is met. Not focusing on some lofty goals somewhere else. In Canada, for far too long, we have suppressed and never addressed our real underlying issues. That is what we must do. And you know what? I mean, my grandparents and great-grandparents on both sides of my family, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, farmers and non-farmers, voted Conservative their entire lives. With the exception of one time my grandmother voted for Justin Trudeau because she said, God, he's handsome, I want to see him on TV. We have to start thinking differently. If we always vote the same way that our grandparents did because we always vote that way and that's the way we do it, and then between elections complain that we don't like how things are, yet go back to the polls and put the X by the same spot, what I need to ask you to do is vote your conscience. Don't let a party tell you strategic vote. Vote, like Jack Layton said, vote for what you wish for, you might just get it. Thank you very much.
Okay, Kevin.
In my closing remarks, I want to address the fact that Leanne Rood wasn't here today. I'm very disappointed, not as a candidate, but especially as a constituent. Her statement that was read off was filled with misinformation. The Conservative Party does not stand up for freedoms. Aaron O'Toole's on record talking about how he's going to continue with all lockdown measures. He's on record talking about how he's going to stand out of the way and let each individual province go ahead and implement vaccine passports. So I'm not sure what Leanne's talking about. I really looked forward today to being able to debate with her, to get her views on things, because I really wanted to understand why she's continuing on with the Conservative Party despite the fact that they've continued to drift so far and so close to the Liberals and NDPs. With that being said, the People's Party of Canada, it offers a great, fresh alternative for Canadians that want real and substantial change. We're different on so many key areas, like I've already discussed. I encourage anybody and everybody that's watching this debate to visit the People's Party of Canada website. It's fantastic. The entire party platform is written out in very easy to read terms. You can see where we stand on everything. And ultimately, and I agree here, where if we keep on doing things the same way, if we keep on voting red and blue, which is, we might as well, what's going to happen is we're going to get the same results. And for all those split the voters out there, because that's what I hear all the time, is splitting the vote between the PPC and the Conservatives. I want to just leave them with what happens if you don't want to split the vote and you go with Aaron O'Toole, and he ends up being exactly who he thought he was, which is a liberal globalist that's not going to provide Canadians with much of, and not going to provide the Conservative voters with any real difference than the current government that's operating. So People's Party of Canada, if anything else, if you're a freedom fighter, if you believe in the importance of our individual rights and freedoms, if you believe that these lockdown measures, and if you know that these lockdown measures have had real damaging effects to our society, that's the only reason that you need to vote PPC on September 20th.
Okay, thank you. All right, we just want to quickly go over some of the voting details for people who are listening. You can go to elections.ca to find your assigned poll. Vote on election day, which is Monday, September 20th. Polls will be open for 12 hours, 9:30 in the morning they open, they go until 9:30 at night. You can also vote on advanced polling days, Friday, September 10th, Saturday, September 11th, Sunday, September 12th, Monday, September 13th. Not going to get into the voting by mail. You can all look that up yourself if you would like that option. And we would like to first and foremost thank all the candidates so much for your time today, for making it here. So Sidit Ranade with the Liberal Party, Jason Henry with the NDP, and Kevin Mitchell with the People's Party of Canada. Thank you very much, all of you. Thanks so much to the Strathroy and District Chamber of Commerce for putting this event on, for Rogers Television for presenting it to all of you, and to all of the people. We got a lot of questions, so thank you so much everyone who submitted questions. And that wraps up the event, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.